Planes and ships from more than 24 countries now looking for what may be a needle in a haystack 11 days after Flight 370 vanished. There's still no trace of that plane. But new reports say the plane's drastic turn-off course was actually programmed into the computer in the cockpit, adding only to the theory whatever happened was the deliberate action of somebody with extensive knowledge of the Boeing 777 jet. Joining me now is Peter Brookes, former CIA officer, senior fellow for national security affairs at the Heritage Foundation. What do you make of this, and how important is it that we determine where it is and what happened to this plane?
Well, Greg, I mean, the fact is we have a large airliner with a couple hundred people missing, and we have very few clues as to its fate. But besides the potential human tragedy here, the loss of life, once again we have a security issue. Before 9/11, nobody really thought of the idea or the possibility that somebody would fly an aircraft into a building. But this missing aircraft is a potential security threat, whether you're talking about Israel, which is reacting to the potential that this aircraft has been hijacked, or even here in the United States, in the terms of we could have something like another accident or an incident where a plane is flown into a building. Not to say that it would happen here in the United States. It could happen anywhere globally. So there's a huge security issue besides, obviously, the human interest and potential for human tragedy that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, there have been a couple of jetliners that ditched into the sea, killing everybody, and it was pilot suicide.
Right.
Two that we remember. Egypt Air was one of them. But it's your sense that we really need to focus on the potential that this plane actually landed safely and is going to be used for nefarious purposes.
That's certainly a possibility, and I'm quite struck by the fact, the reports out of Israel, that they feel that there's a threat. Now, they haven't shared any specific intelligence with us that I know of. Maybe perhaps that's going on between governments, but there's been reporting that they're taking that sort of threat seriously. Israel obviously lives in a very dangerous neighborhood, but they have a very professional intelligence service, and I don't think they would put their air traffic controllers or their Air Force on high alert if they weren't worried about this possibility. I mean, the fact that we have no idea where this large aircraft is, and knowing that these things can be used for terrorist purposes, we should be very, very concerned about that.
Beyond a jet loaded with jet fuel, and we saw what happened with those on 9/11, what else could you put inside this jetliner that could multiply the threat?
Well, of course, you could put explosives on there, but, a large aircraft with full bag of gas or full tanks of gas that's what they basically used on 9/11. There were no explosives on there. I think what you're talking about are the targets, whether you would fly this into a building, whether you would explode it over cities. We've seen plots. Remember, Greg, going back to the fact that we can't take liquids onto aircrafts today, that goes back to a plot coming out of London. And what they intended to do was not to blow up those airliners over the ocean, but blow them up over American cities to increase the casualties on the ground. So just imagine, we saw this terrible tragedy in Seattle just a few moments ago where a helicopter came down. Imagine if you were able to rain down a large aircraft onto a populated area. So that's another possibility.
Especially
there.
A condensed gathering of people.
Sure.
And,
stadium,
those are well publicized.
A mall.
Hey, quick question, Peter. Everybody was under the impression, I think, that after 9/11, the cockpit doors were reinforced to prevent a hijacking. What about that?
Well, that's another concern here. Obviously, if it turns out to be terrorism or something involving human intervention, what happened with security? Critical. There's going to be critical lessons learned. Now, there was talk about a plot. Some information came out of London yesterday or last few days talking about a former Al-Qaeda member who talked about being in touch with some Malaysians that were going to use a shoe bomb to breach a cockpit to take an aircraft. Now, that goes back a little ways, but we know that's possible, so there are ways to get into the cockpit. If you didn't also the possibility that a pilot might let somebody in, as we've seen in some cases. So.
Yeah, and the younger pilot, 27 years old, was apparently caught bringing people into the cockpit that he shouldn't have. Peter Brookes, on another occasion. Peter Brookes, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks,
Good
Greg.
to see you.
Good to be with you.